testing class for today, and I wish I hope every one of you guys are well and keeping safe. Um, this is going to be an introduction into API testing. What I will try to do as much as possible is to make it easy for everyone to understand. I know that there might be a couple of us that we are new to testing, so I'll try to make things explain things and make it easy as we go along. Now, basically, as I said, we'll be looking at the overview of API testing, trying to understand what API testing means and when, what, why, all these questions about what API is and how we can then test API and what are the boundaries of testing and at least the introductory part of what we need to know in order to be able to do API testing effectively. Now, so what is API testing? A lot of us, to be honest, every one of us have used API in one way or the other. When you open your phone to check the weather, you're poking an endpoint or an API. When you go to the ATM machine, you put in your PIN, you check your balance. You're actually using an API. So basically, an API, which is called Application Programming Interface, uh, basically allow communication between two computer components to talk to each other. So, for instance, if you look at the diagram which you can see on the screen, you see that that's the um, if you send a PIN request through the ATM, it goes it communicates with an API at the bank on the banking application or on the banking server, and then once the PIN has been validated, the server sends a response back to the ATM machine. So basically, that communication between the ATM and the bank server, yeah, is the API. So the ATM is actually basically communicating to the bank server, which is the through an API. So API is just like an address. So you want to request for something, you're asking, you'd subscribe to a particular address or resource for you to be able to validate. And once there are some things that you pass within that particular request that actually helps you to retrieve information back from the API. So now API follows a set of rules to allow protocols to communication to occur. So as I rightly said, for instance, when you are at when you are at the ATM point, you enter in your PIN. There is a 4 digit PIN, depending on whatever you've maybe 60 digits, whatever the schema that the API allows. You have to be within the bounds of that schema for that API to be able to communicate and retrieve information as requested. So looking at that diagram, you enter your PIN from the client. The client is the ATM machine. The server is the banking application, the backend of the banking application that the API is exposed to that retrieves the information from. Once the PIN has been entered, there's validation. Validation occurs. Your 4 digit PIN is the schema. The validation occurs at the back end. Then it sends the response back, and then it allows you. Then again, it opens up the interface for you to enter the amount of money that, or check your balance, or whatever transaction that you want to carry out. And then it takes another. Maybe you want to get £5, or you want to check your balance, whatever, depending on whatever you've requested. It takes the communication flows between the clients, which is the ATM machine, and then the server, which is the API backend that you are poking or requesting information from. Now, there are many use cases of API. For instance, Facebook API. When you go into Facebook, you log in into Facebook. You do so many things into Facebook. You can upload pictures in Facebook, videos in Facebook, At that point when you are sending a request and then you are getting a response back. So once you, like for instance, a use case is when you upload a picture, you're actually calling an endpoint, you know, and then you are sending some parameters within the within that particular instance to Facebook, and then once that gets validated, you get a response back. Maybe it's a 200, maybe it's a 400, whatever the response is. That is not open to everybody, but there's a response back. There's a response which you get back. Maybe your video is uploaded successfully. You're able to see the video and all that, or your photo or whatever. So getting your account information from your online portal as well. You're using API, checking the weather. You go on your phones. You enter you request a particular location of to check the weather. These are use cases to use an API, that you're using an API. So from what I've said, in a nutshell, I hope you guys have been able to understand what an API is. It's just a resource, and it just stands as it allows communication between two different computer components to talk to each other. So now another use case of API is if you look at the diagram, which I'm sure my screen. I think I am. Yeah, also from chat. We can't hear you. All right, can you hear me? Can you hear me very well now? I thought you guys said you could hear me. Just type in the chat message if you can hear me. All right, so that's fine. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So, all right. So, as I was saying earlier, if you look at the diagram I have on the screen, to the right we have the database, and to the left, in the middle we have the API logic, and then to the left we have different instances or interfaces where you can access this API and communicate with the backend. So let's say, for instance, this is your database. It contains a list of let's say for instance this is the Facebook uh, database where you've stored in your username and passwords. Now this is the logic. Let's say this is the logic that actually takes all the required information. Let's use a very, very simple scenario. Let's say Facebook login, username and password, which is very common to access. So this API logic will have everything that is required to communicate with the backend and then send the response back. Now, for you to be able to make use of this API logic, you can access it from maybe your computer, you can access it from your mobile phone, or you can also access it from a third-party application, maybe from YouTube or from any other interface. Or you could also access it from maybe this is Quora, or maybe let's say this is your website that has an API that has the Facebook API that actually, if you go to your website, you can actually click on a link that talks to the logic. So there's that communication between these devices or interfaces with this API logic, and then it takes the message back and forth to the database and then sends the response back to the front end. So this is just another common use case of APIs. Now, API can be written and used for web applications. So what I've explained to you now is a form of web application where you can use API, computer operating systems. So for instance, if you have a plug and play mouse, so for instance, if you plug your mouse to your computer or laptop, you're actually making use of APIs. Databases where databases like, it's just like a container that stores information. You have information that stores, some databases store information in files and directories and all that. And then you have software libraries. I don't know if some of you know about software libraries such as Nuggets packages, maybe dependencies, Jar files in Java and all that. And then basic computer hardware, as I've mentioned before, like like plugging your USB device to your laptop or computer, or maybe your interface cards and all that. your memory cards and all that. Those are the kind of things that make use of APIs. So I think that's a good explanation of what an API is for someone that doesn't really know or is hearing it for the first time. Now, the next thing we're going to be talking about is why are companies making use of APIs, and the simple reason is that now a lot of companies, many companies are moving to the microservices model. So what is microservices now? So you have microservices is just like as the name implies, you have your, instead of having one major service that actually makes the application. Let's say, so in this particular use case that I'll be explaining to you, let's say you have your website now. Let's say your website is an e-commerce website. Now, rather than you just having one service that gives you customer information, that gives you product information, that gives you your payments information, that leads, that does so many things. Rather than having just one services. So if if this particular service goes down, then that means your website is down. But with microservices, you have small components that do so many different things. And that is why you have API. That is why, so these microservices make use of different endpoints that talks to each other to make a web application function. That means, so as I've said, that means you have different sections of your application can have separate database stores and separate commands for interacting with that database stores and all that. So microservices are appealing to software providers because they allow components of the software to be deployed more quickly. So you can have your application up with one particular microservices down. Maybe rather than having your entire application down, one of the services might be down, but the application will continue to work. Maybe you might just, for instance, maybe a lot of time you get information that maybe in the midnight of Saturday to Sunday, you might not be able to do a bank transfer, but you'll still be able to see your account balance. Those are the kind of those are the kind of applications that make use of microservices. So rather than having the entire application totally taken down, the component of it is functioning while the other component is under maintenance. So, and that is one of the bases why we use APIs and all that to interact within these microservices. They talk to each other, and then you can just put one take one down while the others are functioning, and there's still interaction and communication. Now, we live in a time where users expect software to be ready and used whenever they want it. And the microservices model ensures that an application will not be down for maintenance when the user wants to use it. So I've explained that. Now, most microservices are using application programming interfaces. So as I rightly said, communication between these microservices is through the APIs, which are a set of commands for how a specific service can be used. And most APIs are using most APIs are using the representational state transfer, which is called REST, that sends information through the HTTP protocol. So the HTTP protocol is just basically it's just basically the web. So if you look at this, I don't know if you can see my screen. I'm showing Google now, Google Chrome. So most APIs, most REST APIs make use of the HTTPS or HTTP protocol to send information between or to exchange information between computer components or between microservices and all that. So that's just what I've explained there. All right. So the next thing that we're going to the next thing I'm going to be talking about is the API logic. Now, so basically the API there are basically three components to the API logic. We have the front end layer. We have the middle layer, which is called the business logic layer, and then we have the data layer. So the API normally stands between the front end, which is your UI, and your backend, which is your database or which is your backend services or anything. So there's always this API this in between this the backend and the front end, and this is where your business logic is. So as I've said initially, this is where all the validation, takes place, between the front end and the backend. Sending information, exchanging information, ensuring that, for instance, okay, let's say let me give you let's say that you want to request information about the weather in, for instance, London. Now, for you to send information to the backend, you need to specify maybe the town. You need to specify, okay, I want to get information about the weather on for Monday next week. So you want to specify maybe the information on the UI will say, okay, give me the country, give me the time and everything. So it is this middle layer. So you enter your information on the front end, which on your computer. Now the logic is within this middle part. So the logic will then, whatever the logic wants will be displayed on the front end. Once you enter the information, the logic will process it. If it is a good response, even if it's a good response, it will process the response here and then send it to the backend and then exchange that information from the backend and then give you your data that you want in the front end. So most times the business logic layer validates the information, and based on that information, enables communication to occur between the front end and then the back end. Yeah, so that's it. So now, web services versus APIs. As I've said before, the web services are the implementation of APIs to communicate between two applications over a network. So usually over the HTTP or HTTPS protocols. Now, so basically, web services web services, as I've said, implements API communication between two applications over the HTTP or HTTPS protocol. So that's one key thing that you need to understand. That web services, you can only make use of they are how like okay. So web services are implementation of web services is through the internet protocol, and that is why so the implementation of the implementation of APIs in web services is usually via the internet. That's it. Now there are different types of web services API. We have the two common ones are the SOAP, which is the simple object access protocol, and then we have the REST one, which is the representational state transfer. So the representational state transfer is mostly used for implementation of web services. So you need to understand this very well. Now, there are two other ones that are called remote procedure call. They are the XML, which is the extensible markup language, and the JSON, which is the JavaScript object notation. I should have made so it's called JavaScript object notation and all that. So the web services make use of APIs, and the most common API that they use is the REST calls, which is available over the internet, HTTP or HTTPS. Now, web services need a network. However, an API does not need a network. So the reason why the web services need a network is because they need to be exposed via the internet, or so all web services are APIs, but all APIs are not web services. So for instance, you can have a SOAP API, which is not an implementation of a web service. And you can have a REST API, which is an implementation of web service. So that's why you say all web services are APIs, but not all APIs are web services. Now, we need to understand what are the differences between APIs and the different types of APIs. So we have this chart shows you the major differences. So SOAP is a protocol, while REST is an architectural style, in the sense that SOAP allows you to SOAP SOAP basically as an API allows just it's more like I'm going to show you an example of a SOAP request. It just contains a schema of the information that you need to exchange between the client and the server. While REST is an architectural style, it does a lot more than that. Now, SOAP stands for Simple Object Access Protocol, while REST stands for Representational State Transfer. Now, SOAP can't use REST because it is a protocol. It's just a communication channel. Whatever you put inside the envelope, inside the body of a SOAP request is what you get back. REST can use SOAP web services because it is a concept and can use any protocol like HTTP or SOAP. So REST is more in the sense that REST is broader. A REST call can make use of a SOAP protocol. You can make use of an HTTP protocol, and is also a concept, that exchanges information between the client and the server. Now, SOAP uses services interface to expose the business logic, while REST uses URI to expose business logic. So what we mean by URI is just basically this unique request. URI is unified request something interface or something. I'll get the right word for you in a bit here. Now, JAX WS is a Java API for SOAP web services, while JAX RS is a Java API for RESTful web services. So it's very, very important that you need to understand what the differences between SOAP and REST is. It's a common question that they ask in interview, especially when you are going for API testing jobs and all that. Now, so SOAP defines standards to be strictly followed, while REST does not define too much standard like SOAP. And SOAP requires more bandwidth and resources than REST, while REST is, it makes use of less resources and less bandwidth than SOAP. So SOAP defines its own security, while RESTful web services inherit security measures from the underlying transport. Now, SOAP permits only XML data formats, while you can have REST in different formats such as text, HTML, XML, JSON, and everything, and other things. So a lot of most common use of a lot of APIs make use of REST than SOAP. So it's just like because of the flexibility of what REST can do, most APIs are now written in REST, and that's why you have REST assured. You have for testing Java applications, and then you have REST Sharp, where you write C# codes to test REST assured APIs and all that. Now, before diving into API testing, we need to learn a few of the basics. An API is made up of a set of requests. These are the requests made to an application server that retrieves, delete, or manipulate data in an application. Before we do this, I need to just show you something so that you would have a basic understanding of what we are talking about. So now this is an API. This is an API that we can subscribe to, and it's free, and we can give it a try. Basically, this API lists, what it does is that it lists different things, users, single users, and all that. So basically, you can actually poke this from your Chrome browser. You don't need any tool to poke this. So I'll just give you a sneak peek into basically what this does. So for instance, if you, as I said earlier, if you are performing an action to get the weather of a particular city or or country or whatever, you are carrying out a GET request. So in this particular instance, I'm looking at this endpoint, and basically what I'm doing is I just want to get the list of users. So this endpoint or this API. So what we need to, so an endpoint is an API, and basically what an endpoint does is that an endpoint stores a resource. So an endpoint stores a resource, but it works through an API. So so the API allows the communication between the clients, maybe the front end, and then the back end. But the back end is where your resource is, which is the endpoint. We'll go into that in a bit. So basically, for instance, if I do a GET request now, it lists all the it says list all the users within this particular API. So it gives us the information about all the users in this API. But we'll go into that in a bit here. So I just wanted to show you that. Now, so an API is made up of a set of REST requests. These are the requests made to an application server that retrieve, delete, or manipulate data in an application's database. So it's a typical example of what I've showed you now, where I have gone into this database to retrieve the list of this information. So this database, if you look at the diagram which I showed you earlier, I think is this one. So this is your database. So this is your database. There's an application logic between the database and the front end. So the front end is my Chrome browser, which I am manipulating the API from. And what I've just basically done is I've asked the API to give me a list of users, and then it has returned all the list of users within that particular. If you look at this page, it returned a list of users, Michael, Lindsay, Tobias, Byron, and all that, and it's giving me the ID. So that is, so that is why I've gotten a 200 response, and it says everything is happy. So now, a REST request is made up of the following parts. So as I said earlier, there are some things that happens when you send a request to the backend. Now, when you're asking for weather information on your phone, you're actually doing a GET request. You're actually saying, okay, you know what? This particular application gets me the weather of London. So you're actually carrying out a verb action, which is called the HTTP verb. Now there's a uniform resource locator. There's a URL that defines the location of the request. So you would have heard me saying that an endpoint. So the endpoint is also called the URL. So this you actually basically tells you where the request, the location of the request is, where the information is stored. So it's just like it navigates you, it points you to the resource location and gets you the information required from the place. Now there are some other things that are also hidden, which you don't see. It's called the HTTP headers. So they provide information to the server about the requests. We'll look at that in a bit here. And then once your request is, depending on what you are doing, there's another thing called the request body that provides information details for the request. So for instance, if you are logging in into Facebook, Facebook needs to know who is logging in. So you need to provide to Facebook your username and your password. That is the request body. So that is what tells Facebook, okay, get me Tobias's profile. So you need to provide information to the Facebook API, login API, to get you what you want to see. If you don't do that, then Facebook will come back to say, I don't know you. Or it's come back to say, or if you provide a user wrong email and password, Facebook might come back to say, you know what, I don't know who you are. Or if you are trying to access Tobias's Facebook profile with a wrong username and password, Facebook will come back to say you are not allowed into this profile. So those are the kind of things that that goes within the API requests. to the to the server, and then the server then comes back with information as to provide you with what you want, which is the response. Now, here are the common HTTP verbs. They also call them. They are also called the crude verbs. And the reason why they call them the crude verbs is because it's C. I didn't. Basically, I'm just going to type it here. Just going to type it so everybody understands what I'm saying. Crude verbs. Yeah. I don't know if you can see my. Okay. Let me just type it here so that everyone can see. So it's CRUD, crude verbs. Yeah. Now, so what this means is the C stands for create, the R stands for read, the U stands for crude verbs, read, so the U stands for update and the D stands for delete. Now, when you are asking information about a particular, for instance, when you, as I said earlier, when you are requesting information about the weather of a particular city, you're asking for, you are carrying out a get verb. If you look at the, if you look at this particular instance here, I am asking this API to get me the list of all the users within this database. So that this is a get verb. So if I click on this get verb, it gives me all the users within this particular resource. Now I can limit it to just give me one user. And if you look at this one, it is now specifying a particular user, maybe user number with ID number 2, to really get me the list of the ID for particular user number 2. If you look at this one does not have, so this one it says, I don't know if I can amend this one. I don't think so. This one is saying API users and then all the users on page number 2. That is what it is giving us here. If you look at this get request, there's nothing there. You are saying, give me the page users in with ID number 23. It returns back nothing, an empty string. Oh, sorry, an empty array. It returns back an empty array. There's nothing there. So if you look at this one, you're saying give us API unknown. It just brings back everything that you have within the resource. So those are the kind of things that you do with and those are the kind of instances where you carry out a get request. Now, as I've said earlier, for a post request can either be for authorization or for you to add to a record. So a post request, you can also say, so that post verb can also be a C. You can either create a request or to read from the database. So as I said earlier, a good example is when you are asking for authorization, where you pass in your authorization details to be able to access a particular resource, or when you are adding a new request, a new record to a database. So a good example of one here is, where is it? Now, if you look at this one, so this post is a create verb. So if I click on this one, you would see that we need to pass a body to the endpoint to be able to access. We need to pass a body in the API to be able to get some to be able to pass requests to the endpoint. So you can see here that I'm creating. If I add this here, because I've actually done this anyway. I've added Morphos and the name is Morphos and the job is leader. It has given me a 201. A 201 means that the response has been successfully created, and then it has added this name and this job title with the ID to the database. So that's for a post request. So a post request, you always can, for a post request, there has to be a body. You always need to pass something. Sorry, can we have our mics muted, please? So for a post request, you need to have something that you pass. You need to have a body as part of the post request, either to get authorization or to register or to create a new record. Registering and creating a record is the same thing. Now, for a push request, it means that you're asking for an update or a replacement to a record. You're replacing a record with a new one. So if you go back to this API, now if I click on this, let me just refresh this. If I click on this put, I hope you guys can see this. If I click on this put now, it says update. If I click on this one, it says update here. So if you look at this one now, I am actually saying that I want to, earlier I put, so I think earlier, if you look at this one earlier, I said the name was Morpheus and the job was a leader. Now, if I click on this put, I want to change the job title. I'm sending the request that replace leader with Zion resident or whatever. And then it gives me back a 200 response. It goes to the back end, does what it needs to do. Then my response is 200. 200 means that your response is okay. It has been successful. We'll go through the response codes in a bit here. So the things that we have learned is simple. We have learned about the verbs. When you are retrieving information from the API, you are calling a GET request. When you are creating information, you are carrying out a POST request. Or when you are asking for authorization to access a resource, you are carrying out a POST request because you need to specify who you are. And then when you are doing this, you need to pass in some information to identify yourself or to create a new record. The GET request does not have anybody. That's why there's nothing to pass in. You're already retrieving information. So all the GET requests don't have anything to pass, anybody to pass. But once you start looking at the POST request, you need to pass information in the body. And this is a JSON format. You can see this information is in the JSON format. When you also go to put, you're also doing the same thing. You need to pass information. So in a bit, I'll show you how you can, what happens when you manipulate this body to, update the record in the database and all that. Patch is also another verb. When you are doing this, it's basically almost the same thing as a post request. Now, a patch request replaces part of the record with new information. So it's similar to this new one, but this replaces just a part of the record with new information. So looking at our example, you can see that it's also carrying out an update. There's really no difference between what this put does and what this patch does. But patch just replaces part of the request, part of the it replaces the part of the request with some new information also, and that. And a delete, as you rightly say, as the name rightly implies, deletes a record from the database. So going back into this, so if I click on this now, so this deletes. So once you are asking to delete, you need to specify what you want to delete. So a delete will also have a body as well. If you click on this one, okay, so this one has deleted. Okay, so you need, a delete. Sometimes sometimes you need, so delete does not have a body, but you need to specify within your request what you are deleting. So if you look at this now, this has deleted user at number 2. So if I list, so this is my number 2 user, and for me to say within the URL that you are passing the information on, you need to specify what you are doing to do the delete. So if you look at the request now, this is the, I'll show you, don't worry, there's a way to show you that actually makes this more meaningful to you, but I'm just going through the verbs to make you understand. So sometimes they might say CRUD verbs. Sometimes they might just say what are the common HTTP verbs for REST APIs. So when you hear CRUD, CRUD, it means the same thing as HTTP verbs. So don't get confused. So the C stands for, because a lot of people have come through interviews and they said, can you tell me what a CRUD verb is? What does the C do? What is the C? What does it represent? It represents create. Create is either a post request. R is the read, which is the get. You are reading information. U is the update, which is either the put or the or the patch, and then the D is the delete. Now there's another one I want to show you. So just so that we have an understanding of different flavors of APIs. Let me show you this one. So okay, 1 second. I want to show you another API. 1 second. So if you want to, it's very easy if you want to know more about API. So all you just need to do is, there are so many free APIs that you can, what have I done? So there are so many free APIs. All you just need to do is to Google them. So another one is this weather one, which actually, I think this one. So if I go to the API, you can it gives you information on how you can use it. It gives you information about the API key, what you need to pass in within your body and the request. So you can get by city. It tells you what you need to do when you get the API by the city, by ID. So for instance, by ID, you need to download the JSON file. This, to be honest, for you to start learning, you can go through this one. This is much more simpler and easier for you to do. I would post some other free APIs that you can use, which is much more straightforward at a later date for you guys. Now, you know that when I showed you this, API, we looked at this. There are some parts of the URL. So if you look at this, one, if you can look at this link. So let's say this is a link now. There are some things that are within this link. So for instance, if you look at this URL, it is giving us information with ID number 2. So if I change it to 3 and press enter, then it gives me information for number 3. So if you look at this, it is basically a URL. But what this URL does is that it points to a particular backend server that stores information. And the information here we have here is just a list of users. So depending on what you are specifying, so if I say give me information on user number 500 and I click enter, you see that it gives me nothing. It comes with an empty, it returns an empty information for me. So it's just, so I hope you guys understand that, just this API, allows communication between, the UI. The UI is my Chrome browser, and the backend, which is the database that stores information about the users. So that's basically what what an API does. Now, the next thing that we need to look at is we need to look at the example of a RESTful API, and we need to understand what the URL is made up of. Now, the protocol part is so if you look at this one, the HTTPS is the protocol. This is what this is what allows the exchange of information between the two computer parts. Now, if you look at this one, if you look at the samples.openweathermap.org is the server path or the domain. This is the domain. And then if you look at, and then the next thing is the, after that is, so basically what we are looking at, this is what we are talking about. Let me just do something. So this is your protocol. This is your protocol. And then if I add the domain to it, this is the domain. And then when I say API, that is the resource path or endpoint. And then when I add the user, so this is the resource path or endpoint. When I say users, or is it, I think it's API/users. Sorry, can we? Yeah, let me just quickly attend to, let me just quickly finish this and I can answer the question that someone has asked. So if you look at this, so this is we are talking about the protocol, the domain, and then we have the API, API user, which is the resource path, because the domain gives us the domain gives us everything to the application, which is this one. And then when we narrow it down to the resource part, we want to get the API for the list of users, and then so it gives us the list. So it's returned the list of users, and then the next thing that we want to do is we want to get a specific. We want to query the database, getting a specific user. So let me see. I want to get user number 5. Then it returns me user number 5. So the 5 is the query parameter, which is similar to what we have here, the query parameter. So some of them, so it's basically depending on how the URL has been configured. Some of them will just require, like for instance, this one does not require a question mark to give you the number. So let me see if I had the question mark. So it's still, so every API every API endpoint or URL will have a particular functionality of how it will display the information that you want to get from it. So this one does not require you to pass any form of special character to query the information that it will retrieve for you. So don't get it confused. So that's the basic explanation of how the URL for an API, a RESTful API, will look like. So the next thing that we're going to talk about the headers. So you remember that I mentioned to you that we're looking at the parts of an API. We've looked at the verb, which we talked about earlier, the get, the post, the put, the delete, and the patch. We talked about the URL, which I've shown you, and then the next thing that we need to talk about is the headers. So now, looking at this diagram, we have different content types, which are part of the headers. Now, HTTP headers can provide information to the server, such as the hosts. the domain and port number of the user making the request. So there are some specific APIs that probably you need to specify, you need to access them from a particular port number, maybe 8080, 3000, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to show you that later. And then part of the headers is also the authorization credentials. Some of them require bearer tokens. Some of them require no authorization. And so what that means is, for instance, if you want to access, so basically, if you are going to access your Facebook profile, you need to specify your username and password. Once you specify your username and password, some magic happens in the backend that is not visible to you. So that is the authorization that happens. So that authorization is always attached to any request you make on Facebook to say this is the person. So you know when you go onto Facebook and then you want to comment on a post, despite the fact that you've logged in into Facebook, when you put a comment on Facebook and then you click post, it identifies whoever has done that. So that authorization that you are carrying from the login still gets attached to every action that you carry out on Facebook. So it's just a form of like, like a form of like a token or a token or anything that gets attached to your profile and then specify who you are and then helps you to continue your session all through Facebook and all that. I'll just show you, I'll show you a simple example of that later on. Now the content type. So when you would remember that I showed you on this, let me go back to this website. So when I carried out the post request, this is the content type. The content type here is JSON. Sometimes you can pass a text. Sometimes you can, we'll see that when we are using Postman. Sometimes you can pass a text. Sometimes you can pass HTML. Sometimes you can pass XML and all that. Different formats. We spoke about it when we were talking about REST APIs and the formats in which they can be accessed or the formats in which they can be used. Now the request body, and I've also mentioned to you that whenever you are carrying out any of these HTTP verbs, we need a request body. So for instance, they might ask you in an interview that which CRUD verbs or which HTTP verb makes use of a request body. So there are only three of them: the post, the put, and the patch request. And the reason being that, when you are making, when you are creating a request, when you are creating a resource, you need to specify the new information that you're passing through. When you are replacing or updating information, you need to replace it with something. You need to pass a body with the information that you're replacing the resource with. And the body specify exactly what information should be added to the database. So that's what the body specifies. And it is usually in JavaScript object notation, which is JSON or XML formats. So there are other types of content type. So the content type can be in application in JSON formats, which I've shown you here. This is content type. And then the XML format is, I'll just quickly show you an XML. 1 second, XML. Content type. So all those things that we have talked about, you can easily access them. Let me see if I have images of XML content type. 1 second. Can I just do something quickly? 1 second. Yeah, I'll be back. And I just want to quickly check the content type and okay. Has anyone got questions? Please, can you type? If you've got questions, can you can take the questions while I try to quickly get you an example of XML schema. Okay. So someone is asking, when carrying out API testing, would you be provided with documentation of actions to be performed by the developer? Yes. So we'll be coming to that later on. There are some specific information that you'll be given. For instance, let me just share my screen again. 1 second. All right. So this is I'll come to a question in a bit here. So this is an example of how the XML schema looks like. It's just it's within an envelope of you'd have something called, let me just give you a better one. So let's see, sample XML format for API. And yeah, so this is how a sample XML will look like. Well, this is a sample request, and then this one has got so many information anyway. So like this one is uh, this one has information about like a contact REST request. As I said to you, XML REST APIs can use both SOAP. You can use both JSON and XML formats here. So you can see that for this particular one, this is a request that request contacts. You have the address, you have the the address, the city, the company, the contact list ID, information. So this is basically what you need to. This particular XML contains information about a particular contact, everything they've done. Maybe the request is to pass somebody's name, and so on the UI on the computer, what's the UI? I'm talking about the laptop or your phone. It might ask you to enter just like a form, these details in a form. So if, for instance, you enter your address, you enter your degree, the school you went to, but the UI will now put everything together in form of depending on the kind of protocol that they've been, the kind of format that the API logic takes. So for this particular instance, let's say that it takes an XML format. Everything you filled in the form will then be transcribed into this format, this envelope format here. It will now be transcribed, and then the API logic will take this information, process it, sends it to the backend, and then give you a response. So let's say that you are applying for a job, and they've requested your address, your details, and everything. So the form on the front end will look like a normal form, like you are filling a normal form, but the logic behind will capture the information in this format, sends it to the backend, and then give you a response back. So that is basically how the XML looks like. So you can just Google sample XML request. This one is a bit, this one has a lot of information within it. There are some that just maybe simple 3 or 4 line formats, maybe just the endpoints that you are subscribing to, the information that you want to pass, and then the error and then the response and all that. So let's deal with the question that we've been asked. 1 second. Where's the yeah, so someone said, are the response code always the same? So are they universal, or does it depend on how the endpoint has been formatted? So we'll come to the response codes in a minute. The response code depends on what particular action that you are carrying out. So could you explain the difference between a JSON and Postman? So Postman is a tool. So this is Postman that I'm sharing to you now. Postman is a tool that you can use to manually test endpoints or APIs. So it's a tool. JSON is a text format. So if you look at this, response body, so the response body is the same thing as, so what I've done here is, if you look at what I've done here is this, basically the same thing I'm doing on this UI is what I'm doing in Postman here. So I've gone to that particular URL, which I've highlighted, and I have said, okay, so this one is saying, give me all the users in page number 2. So this is just user number 2. So I'm requesting information from user number 2. So it's basically the same thing I've done on the UI, but I'm using the Postman rather than doing it from Chrome. I'm asking you Postman to give it to me. So if I click on that, it retrieves the information back, and then this is the body. So it's, when you look at it, it says ID number 2, data, name, Janet Weaver, and then the avatar, whatever. So even this avatar, whatever. So if I click on this one, it opens up a new request. And if I go into that request, it gives me the picture. So you can see, so it's basically the same thing. So if I copy this one, copy it from here, and I put it on the UI, if I put it here, it basically gives me the same information. So Postman is just sorry. Postman go. So Postman is just a tool that actually, Postman is a tool that actually that we use. So it does the same thing. It's a tool that actually that we use to test APIs. So the next thing I want to quickly talk about is, so I think there's one other question. We're going to go into Postman and how to use Postman stuff. So when carrying out API testing, would you be provided with documentation of actions to be performed by the developer? Yes, you can. It depends on the ways of working for that particular team that you are talking about, that you are in. The things that you'll be provided with are, at the very minimum, include the endpoints that you need to poke, the kind of actions that you need to carry out, either is a get, post, put, or patch, and depending on any of these verbs, you'll be provided with the information required, the body and everything. But we'll come back to that in a little bit. So the next thing I want to quickly talk about is, just hold on 1 second, please, guys. I need to do something. Has anyone got any other question that they want to ask quickly? This is the time to ask questions. If you want to ask questions, you can. You can ask questions quickly. Just go on, please. I'm just trying to quickly get something. Just give me 2 minutes. I just quickly do something. All right. So all right. So the next thing I will be talking about is let me see. Have you got any questions? Any questions? No. All right. So the next thing I will be talking about quickly is we'll be looking at the response code. Now, when you carry out a successful operation on an API, you get 200 back. So if you look at this particular example, let's not go into this now. So let's look at this one. So if you look at this particular, when I go to these endpoints and I say get me the list of users, I get 200. So what that 200 means is that my request has gone through successfully, and everything is fine, and I'm getting the 200 back. That's what the 200 means. Now, when you are carrying out a post action, and then you are creating a new record in the backend or in the database, then you get 201. So if you look at this one, when we create a new user, we get 201. So let me just quickly show you something, because so that let me show you this. Okay, let's first go through. I'll give you a run through of Postman in a bit here. So when you're also doing when you're carrying out an asynchronous operation, you get 202. So basically, the best way to remember this thing is looking at this from this perspective. When you are carrying out any form of, when you get 200 or anything from 200 is successful, your resource has been created, your response is okay, everything is going on well. They are more like the client's codes. Now they are more like the success codes now. Now when you now look at 400 to anything starting from 400 is the client's error or validation errors or anything, and then anything from 500 is the server error. So for a bad request, sorry, whoever is, can you just mute your mic? There's a noise that is making some noise. There's something making some cracky noise. So any error, any client error starts from 400, and then if the error is from the backend, so if you do everything properly, and then the backend is saying that the backend is throwing an error, you start from 500. So you have a 500, the 503, and all that error, and all that. So the 400 is a bad request. So for instance, an example of a bad request. Let me see if I can try and get one. Can you guys hear me very well? There's a background noise that is disturbing me. Someone is asking why most companies use Postman instead of Rest Assured for API. Postman is a tool for testing Rest Assured API. Don't get it mixed up. Postman is a tool that is used to test REST APIs. How do you generate API testing reports? You would have to carry out API testing, and then you'd have to link it with a plugin to carry out a report. I think Postman, the advanced level of Postman, you can actually generate a report using from the command line and all that. So which Postman automatically generates for you and then saves it into a file. But that is the advanced level. What I'll say to you is that this is what we are trying to do here is this is an introductory lecture. As part of the internship, if time permits, I can quickly I can quickly give a rundown of Postman using how to use Postman, how to generate Postman, if time permits, how to run Postman from the command line and how to integrate it with Jenkins. We can do that in the internship, but this is just an introductory class that we are doing for this week and next week. Every other detail will be carried out in the internship. So if you want to learn more about Postman, then you can do that in the internship if you want to. Can you kindly suggest a book on API for beginners? To be honest, I don't know any book on API for beginners, but there are a lot of resources on the internet and which you can actually use to learn API testing or for API. If you want to really understand what APIs are, there are so many resources on the internet for you to use. So as we were saying earlier, 400 is a bad request, 401 is unauthorized. So as I gave an example, if you are trying to access Facebook with an invalid username or password, it will give you a 401. 402 is over quota plan on these endpoints. Maybe you've gone over the allocated quota, or maybe, for instance, if you've tried to access a resource over the more than specified number of times you're allowed to access it, you can get a 402. 404 is if you are trying to access a resource that is not available. So for instance, if I use Postman to access, let's say, okay, so I want to use Postman on this API to say I want to get user with ID 5000. So I should get 404, you see, not found. Let me give you, so there's an endpoint here, which I think I have. If I want to access this one, I think, so still giving, because so this is the weather map API, which I was talking, okay, so yeah, so it's still giving me 200, but the code is 401. The code here says I need an API key. So if you look at if you look at this API list of errors, this one, I need an API key to be able to access that endpoint. I need an API key to be able to access that endpoint. So without this API key, I'm getting a 401, but it still says 200, which is wrong. It shouldn't be 200. Let me try and I don't know if I have one here. No, I don't. This API is this open weather API is somehow okay. Right. So when we go into Postman, I will show you details of how you can get all these error. But 404 is trying to access a resource that is not there, that is not available, that doesn't exist. 422 is a validation error, where, for instance, you have your, the API is not able to process your request due to invalid details. Let's say you've given invalid username and password, and then the logic is not able to interpret it and get you the response required. And as I said earlier, 500 is internal server, is any backend error. So if you've done everything from your user perspective, and the backend is throwing the backend, maybe the backend is down or there's an error in the backend. So the backend is anything beyond your laptop, anything beyond your laptop. So where all the information is stored, maybe where the database where Facebook keeps all their users, all the pictures and everything. So let's say Facebook has a problem where they are unable to um, pass all the picture, all the information that you stored in your profile to you. They will give you 500 error. Maybe the server is down, or there's an internal server error, or any of those errors. Yeah. So let me just to make this more explicit. So let's see, uh, 500 error codes. Let's Google them. So, so as I said earlier, anything 200, anything starting with 2 is a success. So we have 200, which is okay, 201, which is created, 202 accepted, blah, 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 blah. Now, anything 400 and 500, so 400 codes are intended for cases in which the client seems to have erred. So in the client, in this sense, is maybe, the user. And then the 500 codes for the cases in which the server is aware that the server has erred. So this is the backend. The server is throwing this error. So examples of 400 code is the bad request, 401 is unauthorized, maybe 402 is payments required, 403 is forbidden, 404 is not found, then internal server error is 500, 501 not implemented, service 502 service uh, unavailable, 503 is gateway timeout and blah 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 and all that. So you can go to this W3C and just Google it, and then you can read through about all these server codes and all that. So I don't know if you've got any further questions that you want to ask with regards to what we've talked about tonight. Do we write test cases in API testing? If you are doing the automation part, you need to write test cases. And even if you are doing manual part, they might give you you might need to write some test cases you might need to write some test cases as to how you've tested the API. Depending on how you want to write it, any action that you carry out. For instance, if I come into these this particular, I think this particular endpoint. So I can say that given I am on this particular endpoint, when I carry out a get request and I click the send button, then I should be able to get the 200. So that is depend. You can write it down as you want to. You can write test cases, and you can also do both depending on what they've asked you to do. So, for instance, there are some specific, depending on how you want to test it. There are some specific endpoints or APIs that takes specific verbs. So, for instance, this particular URL may only take posts. So if may only take post. So if I carry out a 400, so this is still, so this is, to be honest, there's a lot of things going on here that doesn't look right, to be honest, but just ignore it here. So there's a specific URL that that you can only carry out specific kinds of HTTP verbs on them. So, but we'll look at Postman. We'll look at Postman next week, and then we'll do a lot more. But before we go, let me just so basically everything I've done on this, everything I've done here. So for instance, everything I've done here, I'll just quickly replicate them on Postman. So Postman is just, I'll just give you a quick rundown of Postman. Postman is just a tool that you can download from the internet. So Postman, if you want to download Postman, you can just download Postman, depending on whatever operating system you have. Download Postman. It's as simple as ABC. I don't need to show you that. You can download Postman, and then once you download Postman, all you need, it gives you an interface that is just it gives an interface like a blank one like this. Once everything has been downloaded and everything is fine, all you need to do is if you want to play around with this particular one, which I have, you can Google. There are so many free APIs that you can check. So for this particular one, I'll just show you. So all I need to get is the so following the instruction on that particular one for people. So all you need to do is just copy the protocol and the domain name, copy them, put it here, just paste it here, and then if you go to the this, this is the link request reqres.in. So for you to get the list of users, if you want to play around with Postman, so if you said that if you click on this get the list of users, it gets you everything here. So this is the path and query parameter. So this is the path parameter. Where is it copy like this? So this is the path parameter. So add your path parameter to it, copy, and then to get the list of all the users in page number 2. So it says you need to carry out a query. So when you are carrying out a query, you need to use question mark. So query where page equals to, and then you click the send button. So once you click the send button, it gives you an information back. So the information is response and it is in the body. So you can look at the body here. It gives you a response back. And this is everything that you want. So if you look at this part of it here, this is status 200, the same 200 that you get when you come to this place. When you click get here, it does some magic and it gives you a response 200. It's the same thing I'm getting here as a 200. Then the time that it took to process the request and give me back my response. So the request, so basically I'm carrying out the get request on this URL, and then my response is this. So imagine if I was playing with this on my phone. If I go to this URL and I click OK, then it will come back with all these jargons, all this information for me. And then it comes back in 68, is it microseconds or whatever, and then the size of the file is 1.83 kilobytes. Now, so I did talk about headers. I spoke about headers. So this is the headers. There are so many things that you can get within your header. You can add content type. So this is content type. You can say the application dots. So many content types here. If you click application, See, the only way you can understand this thing is if you play around with this. I think I've given you enough. I've shown you enough way to play with it. So you can just download it and play with all these things. So if you say application.xml, this one is HTML and XML or something. So application.xml, that is the format, that is the content type that you want to pass to. But this particular URL does not need any content type. So you can, apart from that, you can also get application.json as the content type that you want to pass as part of your request. So some specific URLs or API require that you pass all this information as part of your request, or else you'll be getting error messages back. And the error messages back from your side, from the user side, is going to be for a 400. You'll be getting a 400 error back. The other thing is the authorization, which I spoke to you about earlier. Sorry, let me not use this. I'm just going to be all over the place today because I've done a lot on this one, so it might not look tidy to you. Okay, all right, just if you look at this one, a second. I'm just trying to get something. All right, I don't want to confuse, but let's leave it. Let's just continue with what we were doing before. So if I want to get a post request now, so if I go to this post part of it, I copy. So for me to carry out a post request, all I need is I don't need to add any query to it. I just need the path, not the path, I just need the path parameters. So the path parameter is this API/user. So if I come to Postman and I say API/user, that's just the path. Now, if I let me do something. Let me just copy this. Let me just copy it and then delete this one. I don't need this one. I don't need this one. Don't see it. I don't need this one as well. I don't need this one. All right, so if I just add a new one and I paste this there and I say posts. Now in the body, because I'm carrying out a post request, I need to specify what I'm posting. So all I need to do is to click on raw and then the format in which I want to post. So once you click on this raw, you can specify the format in which you want to. If you want to pass an XML format, then that means that I have to go and copy. I don't think this application accepts XML. So I have to copy something like this and paste it there. So if I do, so let me just, if I copy this one, I paste it, it will give me error. So, well, it still said created anyway, but this particular API only accepts well, it only accepts JSON formats or something. I expected that it would give me an error. It wouldn't. Okay, it's because let me do something else. Let me just copy this. Let me copy this. Let me copy this and post it there. So you can see that it's highlighting that it's giving me error. But once I change this to XML, it should be fine. So once I change it back to HTML, it's fine. JSON, then it starts highlighting that there's an error. So that is the body that you would normally pass. So for that particular API, this particular API wants us to pass the body. So if I copy this and I paste it there as the under the body, it has to be highlighted under the body. paste it there, and I click the name as let me see, blue sky. Um, the job title is teacher, and it has to be, and it has to be valid. Your XML document has to be valid. So if I try to send it now, bad request. So you can see that it's a bad request. And the reason why I'm getting the bad, if you look at the error messages that we talked about, bad request is a 400. The reason why I'm getting the 400 is because my JSON, the body that I'm passing is not valid. So I need to correct the error. It's because I didn't include the quotes. I need to correct the error. So basically, as part of the kind of testing that you do for an API, you need to be specific. You need to carry out different kinds of testing operations. Um, in your manual testing classes, I'm sure you'd go through how you'd carry out the different types of testing. If you are given maybe there's some testing technique that they call boundary value analysis, equivalence class partitioning, positive testing, negative testing, happy paths. There are so many names that they call different testing techniques. But you need to be able, as part of the kind of testing that you do here, you ensure that this particular URL only accepts valid inputs when you're carrying out a post operation. So if I change it to, so my JSON is validated now, as in there's no error there. If I send a request, I should be able to get 200. So it says that this particular name, blue sky, and the job title teacher has been created with the 151 ID. Yeah. Now, if I don't know whether this particular API retains the information that you pass to it, but we can try. So if I now change this verb to a get request, and I say get me, if I say get me 151, if I,
Can you guys hear me now? Yeah, sorry about that. All right, so I was just saying sorry about that. I was just saying that this is just a fake. This requires in is just a fake API. It's not a real one. So when you carry out a post action, let's say you say your job title is a leader or whatever, yeah, it doesn't. There's no validation. It doesn't store this information when you send it in. It doesn't store the. It only just gives you a fake response, a body like this. It doesn't store this information in the backend. So that is why if you want to retrieve it back with this ID, 888. So if I go back to get and I say users 8888 and I delete the body and I send it, it doesn't bring back anything. It says the 404 not found. But it's just a good way for you to start to understand what API is and learn and just play around with it. So I would say that download Postman, go to this URL, and then just play around with this. Based on the explanation I've given to you, um, this is your domain, protocol and domain. This is your protocol and domain, and then this is your uh, path parameters. So for each of the actions, for each of these verbs that you want to carry out, this is your path and query parameter. So some of them have queries. So anything that starts with the question mark is a query. Anything that starts with the question mark is a query. And so this is a path parameter, and all that. So you can just play with it. Just use Postman to play around with it, and then you can also, as you play around with it, try to carry out some different forms of action that generates different status codes based on what we've shown you today. So I think we'll stop here today, and if you have any questions, we'll take questions for the next few minutes if there are any. So a path parameter specifies a location to a particular resource, while a query parameter actually gives you specific information within that particular resource. So if you look at the diagram of, if you look at this diagram, you want to, okay, so this diagram might not explain it. Okay, so if you look at this diagram anyway, forget about everything. Forget this, your query is, you are querying that this particular URL says, get me the weather in London. Because you have the question mark. The question mark is somewhere around there. I don't think you can see properly. But let me explain you this one. So if you look at this, if you look at this URL, let me copy this URL. So if you look at this URL, this is your path. So if you, this is your protocol, this is your protocol, this is your domain, and then if you add API/users, that is your path parameter, because it is specifying all the users within this resource, this endpoint. So if I just say API, I doubt if it's going to bring out anything API. It should just take me to the front end. This is the front end, and it says 404. Nothing is there. But once I give it a path parameter, which is the users, and I click enter, then it gives me my everything in my resource. And once I say, okay, once I now want to query this resource, the users resource database, and I'll say, okay, give me users with where ID equals to 2. I expect that to return number 2. If I change it, that's a query parameter. So I have added a query with the question mark. So basically, this is what I did. I came to this resource and I say, okay, give me, sorry. And I say, give me with a query. I had a question mark with a query. Return me values with ID equals to 6. Yeah, it will then return Tracy with ID 6. Or if I say, give me email where name is, let me see this one, where name is Tracy, this one. So I really don't know, but yeah, so, okay, let me go back. I'll do something now. Let me go back. Okay, so I want to say, I expect that it should work anyway. So I want to say, okay, let me query. I want to query now with email. So give me users where email equals to this person. Equals to this person. I expect that it should give me that particular, no, it's not, it doesn't work on that. But you'll find out that okay, let me see if your name works with, where's first name? Let's try first name is John. First underscore name equals to George. No, it doesn't work on that. One second, hold on a second. It doesn't work, but it allows you to query based on ID anyway. So other APIs, if you're in a work environment, you can configure the API to query anything. Maybe apart from querying so the ID works. It only returns whatever is the value of the ID. But in other instances, you should be able to query based on the email. Say, give me back everything with email. So if I say email, then you should be able to return everything with email. If I say ID, that's your query parameter. Without even specifying the IDs, you should return everything. And if I say, if I want to be specific, but this, to be honest, this is not a really good. It's just a practice one. It's just for practicing, for beginning, for introduction. It's not really a good endpoint to test just like that. So, all right. How do I download Postman? Yeah, go on Google and download Postman. How do I download Postman? I mean, what are we looking for? What to prompt the user Postman or JSON? What exactly? Postman is a tool. I've said it. I think I've said it like 100 times tonight. Postman is a tool. JSON is a text format. If you don't really understand how I've explained it, what exactly are looking for or testing? What are we looking for for testing? You are looking, as I've said earlier, what we are see, basically everything I've shown you with Postman tonight is testing this API. I don't expect you to grab everything tonight, but to be honest, if you really want to understand API testing, you can't do it within 2 weeks, to be honest. That's just all I'll say about it. It's not, I don't expect somebody that hasn't done API testing to grab it within 2 weeks. That's just all I will say. But if you really want to know the difference between Postman and what did the person say? Postman and JSON, you need to Google them anyway. This is Postman that I'm showing you, is a tool that you can use to test APIs. SoapUI is also another tool. Swagger is also another tool. That you can use to test API. You can use different things to test API. To be honest, you can use there are so many. You can use JMeter. You can use so many things to test API. So Postman is a form of tool. JSON is a text format. So this is JSON. So to be honest, everything that you find here is actually the body here. So if I go to my Postman and I return list of users, so this is JSON. So you can see this is JSON. For the person asking, this is JSON. This is JSON. If I change this to XML, this is XML. No. This is not even XML. This is also JSON. So this is, to be honest, so the best way to understand it more is, I think next week I'll show you different, I'll show you the different formats and you'll be able to understand it better. So let's call it a day here. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you guys. Which one is the last question? All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Insightful. So to be honest, I don't expect every one of you to, you're coming to do something new to understand it in the first lecture or the first day. It should take a bit of time, but I think you get there with you know, lectures and all that and research and all that. All right, thank you everyone, and have a good day. Bye bye.